In this lesson, we'll learn how to add some wet footprints to the ground behind our runner. Okay, so in the last lesson, we added some wet stains to the shoes around the runner's feet. So at this point, let's go ahead and work on the ground some. So we talked about adding possibly some wet footprints here. And obviously, you can see that this runner currently isn't really leaving any kind of footprints. I mean, we have a little bit of a shadow that's appearing right here from the foot contacting the ground based on the light source, but we don't have any footprints. So let's go ahead and jump over here, and I'm just going to quickly make a new group underneath our wet shoes and call it footprints. And I'll go ahead and drop a layer into there, and we'll call that layer left foot. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and grab our brush tool, and I'm going to grab this brush right here again and make sure my pressure sensitive opacity setting is turned off, and let's jump into quick mask mode by hitting the Q on our keyboard. So in quick mask mode, we can come in here and paint our own mask. We did this very early on in this course, and I'm going to come in here and essentially paint where I want that footprint to be. So I'll probably end up cleaning this up a little bit, but you know, thinking about this footprint, it probably comes back sort of like that. We have a little bit of perspective to keep in mind when we're doing this, so probably come back sort of like so. Bring that outer edge and that curve there. And we'll just kind of curve this side around as well. And we're starting to get there. Let me come in and sort of clean that up with my eraser. And I have my eraser set to exactly the same brush here. But let me rotate around and kind of hit this line underneath a little bit better. And just clean that up right there. All right, so that looks okay. I may need to come in here and just extend this out a little bit more. It looks like I don't really have the perspective I need on this opposite edge here. So maybe do that and then bring this out a little further. So when you paint your footprints, paint whatever footprints you want. It's really up to you. I'm just trying to get something that looks fairly realistic. So notice I've only painted one of these footprints for right now, but that's totally okay. The other footprint we'll end up doing after this lesson on a new layer. It's going to be exactly the same workflow. So let's go ahead and jump out of quick mask mode at this point by hitting Q, and I'm going to invert that selection with a Control-Shift-I, and we'll just jump down here to our base image, the original layer, Control-J to copy that to a new layer, and we'll actually be using this layer. Let me go and delete left foot there. We'll just call this left foot. And great. So if I drag this around, you can see we basically duplicated a chunk of the pavement, and we're going to use this for basically our footprint. So let me come in and switch the blend mode of that over to something like maybe darken, which doesn't have much of an effect. You can see there, just a subtle effect. Now if we switch that over to multiply, we're going to get a crazy dark footprint, but I don't want that darker footprint. So let's look at some other ways that we can darken that up some. Let's double click on that layer, bring up our layer styles dialog, and I'm going to start by adding in maybe a gradient overlay. Now we used those in the last couple lessons, or actually the last lesson when we were doing the stains on the shoes. And we're going to use it in a very similar fashion here. So I want to invert that though, or reverse it. So we'll reverse it like so. And I'll go ahead and line the angle up while we're looking at it in its default state. Line it up to right about there. So it's kind of at the angle of that foot. And let's go ahead and increase the scale on the gradient as well. And we can just kind of drag that gradient a little bit if we need to. Now let's go ahead and set some colors for the gradient, and for the colors I want to be able to kind of zoom in on the pavement here, so we'll just do that out to the side, and let's select this dark color stop. I'm going to select one of the darker colors here, maybe something like that. Right around in there, we'll start there, and for this color stop I'm going to select maybe one of the lighter colors. Maybe something like that. And let's go ahead and set this over to something like darken. And maybe we'll try multiply, see what that looks like. Okay, so that gets us really, really dark. But I tell you what we can do. We can come in here and let's go ahead and hit OK. We can come in and drop the fill down just a little bit. Maybe the opacity of the layer. Kind of taper that back some. Now we have a very crisp edge there on that foot. You can see here we zoom in on that. It's very crisp. Let's say we want to blur that just a little bit. Now we can come in here and run a Gaussian blur, but instead let's do it with a mask. I'm going to come in here and control click on the layer itself. And let's go ahead and we'll come up here to select, modify, and I want to go ahead and feather the edge of that selection here. So I'm going to feather that about 20 pixels maybe. We'll say 20 pixels for right now. Now that's going to feather all edges, including this one right here, which we probably don't want to feather. In fact, let's go ahead and check that. We'll just switch into quick mask mode again with the Q on our keyboard. And let me grab my eraser and just make sure that we don't have any of that red creeping in there. I don't want to get into the feathering on these edges on either side, but let me go ahead and do that right there. Probably want to make sure we have a soft brush set. And we'll switch back out of quick mask mode again with the Q key. Now at this point, let's go ahead and create our mask here. We'll just jump over in the layers panel and create that new layer mask. And you can see here how that kind of blurred the edges of the mask. So if we jump into that mask, you can see exactly what the effect of that feather was. So I think that's starting to look pretty good. Now, looking at that, and it seems to have warmed up the shadow quite a bit in there. So let's do this. Let's jump back into our layer styles. First thing I want to do is maybe come in and lighten up this color just a little bit. And maybe even adjust the gradient some. Now let's do a color overlay layer. And again, maybe we'll set this over to something like darken. Let's choose kind of a blue color. Really desaturated, really light blue. And you can kind of see how that color overlay is actually warming that up just a little bit. So we may come in here and add a little bit more of it there. Depends on how much you want. But let's go ahead and try maybe multiply and see what that does. Yeah, let's taper that back just a bit. Yeah, that's starting to look pretty good. Don't want too much of a blue tint to it. So I might adjust either the color here or the opacity of this color overlay and get that looking exactly like you want it to. So I think that's starting to look pretty good as far as a wet footprint. Now I may come in and modify that some in between lessons. Maybe try and pull it back yet even a bit more here with the opacity slider, sort of like that. And I tell you what I'll also do is I'll also go ahead and create the other footprint right over here just to kind of make it consistent. Maybe we have the toe peeking into the picture where she is stepped. So I tell you what we'll do though, in the next lesson, let's go ahead and move on. I'll finish up the footprints, and in the next lesson we'll move on and begin creating some splash puddles around the feet of our runner here.